How might your life have been different if there was a religion for you? A religion that honored you as a woman, as made equal in the image of God. Welcome to Heretica, her ecofeminist theology podcast. My name is Elena and I am an ecofeminist theologian. Please subscribe at theologyofher.substack.com. The three phases of rites of passage. As I have explained, a requirement to achieve the magical religious potency of parthenogenesis is to create a substantial devotional relationship with a virgin goddess, which ties into her sexuality and fertility. This is done through the ritual practices of rites of passage, which create a transition in between status, known as the between and betwixt form or existential liminality. Here, they initiate transitions between past and present to awaken sacred memory, including serpent power, a type of primordial energy or life power which flows something like electricity. I will elaborate on further when I explore the Annunciation and Mary's Menarche. When the initiation process is complete, an intimate, intuitive knowing relationship is developed with the Virgin Goddess. And through the inner ear and inner seeing, the initiate receives direct guidance, or the sacredness of communication, and their path towards self-realization begins to be slowly revealed, culminating in divine vision, and from there, the final and gradual transcendence towards the original unity of a normal male and female. Importantly, for this thesis, when a girl experiences the liminal period early on in her life, this becomes a pivotal juncture where she sets a life pace for how she will respond to and express her great mysterious fertile powers throughout her life, and will learn to either diminish or cherish the delicate force which is her virgin maternal nature. This existential concept of betwixt and between was initially developed by ethnographer Arnold van Gennep in his book Rites of Passage in 1909, and later Victor Turner subsumed the meaning of the spiritual event of passage to a single word concept, liminality, also known as the threshold stage, where the layers of the untrue self begin to shed themselves and the initiate or neophyte has to recreate themselves, in this case as a mirror image of the Virgin Goddess. According to Van Gennep, the betwixt or between period is the liminal period that pertains rites of passage. Rites of passage tend to be found in smaller, simple societies whose lives follow the cyclical rhythms of nature, being the seasons and the moon cycle, but also rites which accompany every change of place, state, social position, social behaviour, and age. As a result of his explorations, Van Gennep marked rites of passage by three phases: separation, margin, and aggregation, to which threefold structure Turner agreed and renamed as preliminal, liminal, and postliminal rites. The first aspect, the preliminal rites, involves a complete separation from what is known, constructed identities, familiar surroundings, and from habits of thought and emotions. The uninitiated neophytes have left a self that was culturally and socially embedded, with identities and relationships held within an overarching worldview that provided orientation. Thus, the first move is towards disorientation, a dissolution of identity and attachments of relationships, and into liminality. The second stage, the liminal or transition rites, is where the neophytes exist in a realm of ambiguity and paradox, and where there is confusion surrounding customary reference points in life organization. While this liminal phase includes living in physical isolation, that can take the form of living within a customary social setting and feeling as an outsider, even though you're not being wholly physically and socially isolated. This process involves dropping all social statuses and being completely equal in a communal organization. Further, the neophytes live in individual or collective poverty, which is considered sacred, as it's ritualized and enshrined in meaning and symbolism. Their instructor is an elder, who also completed the initiation and holds to high esteem the common goals and values of society and the common good. According to Turner, this liminal phase is a state of reflection, whereby the initiate is forced to examine and redefine conscious and unreflected thoughts, sentiments, beliefs, attachments, norms, and values that inhabit his own internal and external world. This stretch of time is sacred because it dissolves held norms that govern individual internal structures, those held by society and those created by institutions. The restructuring that happens is authentic and in alignment with the sacred and mystery of life, not distorted or false. But the veils that hide the truth are revealed, and it is only after such radical dissolution or purification that the transitional being can enter the realm of pure possibility. Finally, only the neophyte can enter the third stage, the postliminal rites, where they are initiated back into society in their new state of consciousness, their cosmogony, and into the powers that generate and sustain the whole of creation. Next chapter, the liminal consciousness of the initiate. In this liminal period, the liminal persona is considered to be structurally invisible. Although physically they are there, socially they are without a structural reality, meaning without a sex distinction conducive to parthenogenesis. In this liminal state, which is the transitional period, one such structure is at the time of menstruation, where they are metaphorically considered as dead, or to be in another place, and seclusion is required to bring them closer to a supernatural power or a deity. Van Gennep defines how there are three things that are required for a rite of passage to be transformational: seclusion, taboo, and exposure to symbols and ritual practices. Exposure to symbols is expressed as the sacra, the heart of the liminal matter, and how the mysteries, mythical history, cosmogony, and theogony is communicated to the initiates, which includes the use of bones, tambourines, apples, mirrors, deities. In this liminal period, the persons caught in the threshold state were regularly camouflaged as creatures, and they would wear just segments of clothes or special robes. In this state, they no longer had an identity or social position, and they experienced egalitarianism, where their behavior became humbler. This separation from their life is represented, in fact, by their own metamorphosis. Overall, in rites of passage, the sacra are communicated through disproportion, monstrousness, and mystery, with the final aim being to create abstract contemplation by the mind during the liminal time of reflection. Equally, for the initiates to realize that the human body is a microcosm of the universe. The body is essentially represented and regarded as a sort of symbolic template for the communication of gnosis, mystical knowledge about the nature of things and how they come to be what they are. Specifically, for girls, rites of passage allow new initiates to connect with the group and get to know their role in society, but also their individual womanhood. It also provides women with means of ensuring their own autonomy, influence, and social control. notably when rituals, myths, and social circumstances are placed within the framework of the initiation paradigm, together with the assistance of the imaginary. They reveal a common meaning, an ontological relationship that explains liminal topology and space, and helps the initiate create liminal characters, status, and behaviors. As such, the law of symmetrical inversion comes into play, which means that when the initiates integrate back into society, they will experience and act out the reverse attitudes and behaviors of what would be expected by the rest of culture, who were not part of the initiation process. For example, wild or antisocial behaviors. Such behaviors are aligned with following one's inner knowing and not the social norms, which highlights how liminal consciousness, which instigates liminal behavior, is required for parthenogenesis to occur. This is because the path of parthenogenesis has been obscured by patriarchal religious culture. Therefore, for a woman to achieve self-realization, she needs to enter a flow of life that is in the opposite direction of conventional living. Since both liminal consciousness and liminal behavior are associated with following one, to realize how they are more than their individual egos, and the ability to think beyond the boundaries of given structures and identities. Hence, this can lead to self-realization. Essentially, it is where unconscious and consciousness meet, for purposes of transforming into superconscious awareness. This sacrifice is at the core of the liminal self-transformation process. Liminal consciousness may also be used to refer to the absolute threshold of perception, the lowest amount of detectable sensation. During the liminal phase, these rites could be disorienting and cause suffering. Only when one completes the passage is there a renewed and reconfigured life vision and ethos. Interestingly, even though when one loses oneself, this can disorientate how we experience life and bring our life into a state of mental and emotional chaos. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Chaotic developments, although often considered to be pathological appearances, may also be a fertile intermediate state that leads to new structures and ability to organize and interpret life events and existentially integrate higher spiritual experiences. Overall, it's a process of psychic uprootedness, which takes someone from being an uncommitted or self-serving individual to being a committed person in a sacred community, thereby releasing unprecedented potency. The liminal period is a move into the unknown, where there are no familiar reference points, internally or externally, in order to be able to touch the sacred. Furthermore, when one crosses the threshold, one experiences a symbolic bodily death, which is the beginning of the process of transformation. According to Turner, the purpose of this three-stage liminal passage is to enter the realm of pure possibility. That is the singular and rare possibility of touching the infinite, the unbounded, the immortal. Turner as such highlights two primitive purposes. One is to foster a change in the depth of being in the neophyte, to change the innermost nature in order to initiate the neophyte into the arcane knowledge, sacred. The second is to be initiated into axial principles of life and primordial elements of the most sacred things, the ultimate mysteries. From a religiosity standpoint, it's only in this liminal stage that we can touch the sacred, which according to Turner is the heart of the liminal process, and thus can be interwoven into the religious consciousness. During this liminal transition, one receives revelation of the real and instructions on the ethical and social obligations of the community. It is something that cannot be verbally taught, but only roused and evoked through spontaneous liminality or through enactment. It exists subliminally in consciousness. What's important to point out is that ancient religion in Greece is not what in modern terms we define as religion, a conscientious moral obligation, duty, and regard for sacred things. Rather, the ancient Greeks used the term threskia, a worship which included veneration of the gods in all spheres in daily life. And the distinctions between the religious and non-religious was probably inconceivable. When it comes to the term initiation, while we see in modern scholarship that it is interpreted as a process by which participants are initiated into a new status in society, for the ancient Greeks, initiation meant into a cult where higher knowledge and the experience of the divine is promised. Rites of passage, thus in ancient Greece, were inseparable from the divine, as God was omnipresent and created an alteration in religious status, including and alternative expression in the sexual potency, which would be intertwined with the divine. Interestingly, in Neoplatonic thought, it was taught that wisdom and knowledge of the divine was not publicly available, but demanded both initiation and ascesis for it to be gradually revealed to a seeker through training. This mental training involved bringing the noesis, higher intuitive, non-discursive thinking, that happens in space or eternity, and has non-linguistic representations, but in a sense is still conceptual, into cooperation with the ania, embodied or lower discursive thinking, which happens in time and has linguistic representations, for the psyche to gain unity with the One. Even through noesis, as the psychic self dominates over the ania, the embodied self is not neglected and gradually finds stability in the intuitive intellect noesis. So here we have seen the component of liminality within rites of passage, 3 stages which explore the liminal period, being the preliminary rites, the transition rites, and the postliminal rites. This brings about liminal consciousness, which changes through ritual processes for the purposes of gaining higher knowledge. In the next chapter, we will see how these are applied to women's pubescent rites of initiation. Thank you for listening.
How might your life have been different if there was a religion for you? A religion that affirmed you as a woman, as equal to man, and made in the image of God. How might your life have been different? Heretica, her eco-feminist theology educational podcast.